Attention, children. It is the second week of camp, and I am very displeased at what I am seeing out there. Specifically, what I am not seeing. Where do all these campers keep running off to? Estrella, Moro, Shine. All three of you are in big trouble should you happen to return and still be alive and not be vengeful ghosts. Now, to mitigate the number of missing campers, I'm instituting new rules. 1. No more unsupervised play. 2. No more drug cartels. They don't belong at camp. Quite honestly, I don't know why they were allowed in the first place. And 3. Under no circumstances will there be any more haunted graffiti allowed. Holy hell! Who brought that tiger to camp? What did I say about that? Stay away from that tiger and stay alive!
Hello, welcome to Bunk 237, horror movie podcast, the fantastical, maybe real summer camp that we created in our heads so we could sit cross-legged in the dark and talk about horror movies. I'm Tuyet Nguyen. You can call me Tuyet.
Yay! And I am Robin's Lottig, your co-host. And our wonderful guest today is Prince Jackson. He is the owner of Goodnight Life and a podcaster for Bloody Disgusting. Thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is honestly super crazy excited to do this, and I am looking very much forward to talking about the film we will be talking about.
Oh my God, me too. And speaking of, Tuyet, what are we watching today?
Well, thank you for that prompt that I asked you to do earlier before we started recording. Today,
you're welcome.
I remembered to do it.
You nailed it. But then I ruined it by calling you out.
No such thing.
But the movie that we're watching today is, we are watching Tigers Are Not Afraid, written and directed by Issa López. It is a dark fantasy tale centering on a gang of orphan children caught up in a Mexican cartel violence and the very real monsters created every day by the drug war. This is a very decorated film. It premiered in 2017 at Fantastic Fest, where it won Best Horror Director, #Women in Horror. From there, it just kind of kept winning so many awards at so many festivals. I think the last number I saw was 51 in total. And then it premiered on Shudder in 2019. And it's just been getting great reviews from there. So that's to say, this is a pretty good movie.
That it is.
Yeah. And Prince, you picked this. You brought this to us. So
I did.
What brought you to it?
Yeah, so what specifically brought me to this film is just how absolutely enamored I get when I watch it. And it's something that you quite have not seen before. Like it's very interesting, especially coming from the director Issa López. And I mean, I'm very excited for her next film, which has to do with westerns and werewolves. I'm just like, sign me up.
Yeah, and produced by Guillermo del Toro.
That's right.
Yeah.
Who is a big fan, and you can see the influence for
Oh, totally.
sure. I mean, like, watching it very heavy-handed, I was like, oh, there's Pan's Labyrinth. There's The Devil's Backbone.
Absolutely.
But also it was like, oh, there's The Goonies, and there's The Lost Boys, and there's, like, Stranger Things, and just, like, I love kid gangs, you know?
And it's perfect. It's perfect.
It's so good. I think Jonah Baez, actually the first guest that we had on Bunk 237, recommended this movie to me a couple years ago. And I just didn't watch it because I don't listen to what Jonah says, apparently. But I'm
Sorry,
so
Jonah.
glad, Prince, that you brought us up because I loved it so much.
So this was your first time seeing this?
Yes.
Oh, amazing. Yours as well, too, yet?
Mine as well.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
yeah, it was such a good watch. As a horror fan, I can take a lot of gore, like fucking buckets of blood, bring it on. But like any kind of like shimmer of real world violence, like gang violence, like, you know, the drug war is a very real thing. These border towns, the violence, these ghost stories, those are real stories. And that makes me very nervous. Like, I can't, like, true crime, I like true crime, but I can only do so much. Like, that's what keeps me up at night, you know what I mean?
The same way. I'm the exact same way. And when the real stuff starts happening within this film, I think that's why I'm so drawn to it, is because it's such, even though it's very much a fairy tale, it's very much a dark fable, right?
Yeah.
But when the real life horror is incorporated, it gets so grounded so very quickly. And it kind of just like snaps you out of it and just like, oh yeah, they're like dealing with some real life shit. Oh, sorry, can I cuss on this? I'm sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay, cool.
Hell yeah, you can.
So when they're dealing with this, it just makes you feel for these kids, and the fact that it's only kids that I guess that we're watching, which can be one, terrifying, because it's just like, oh my gosh, they're so vulnerable, they're young, how are they going to get out of this? Their parents were literally slaughtered, some right in front of them, and it's so mind-boggling to see how everything is just represented within this film. And the fact that it took Issa López like extremely hard to have this film be shown to people just boggles my mind as well, because I feel like this was just a slam dunk home run. Like, this definitely should have just been in Fantasia Fest years ago, because I believe it was something like maybe a year and a half or 2 years that she tried to get this film to Fantasia, and they just kept like, nope, or Fantastic, excuse me. And she was just trying multiple different types of festivals, and all of them were cutting her out, and they just didn't want to give her the chance. And then once she sent it to Guillermo and he checked it out, that's when it was just like, okay.
Do you know what? So I read a few reviews of this film before watching it, and I find that reviews specifically of like women directors tend to be a little harsher. And I don't know if I'm just seeing that, but I found there were a lot of reviews that really talked about the pacing of the film, and they were like, and everyone of course talks about the big sort of Guillermo del Toro influence and where that came from, but it was like many reviews cited that the middle was a little bit lacking. There was a lack of urgency and a lack of buildup and suspense.
They're wrong.
What?
They are wrong.
I agree that they're wrong.
Garbage.
Wrong.
Right? But I read
Absolutely wrong.
multiple reviews on like big websites, big review, like I think on RogerEbert.com was one where it was like, it's an imperfect movie and there was a lack of urgency. And I was just like, are we watching the same movie?
These people, I think these people are not understanding that maybe it was billed to them as like a horror movie, you know,
Right.
and not like a gorgeous fairy tale, like heartbreaking fairy tale that also is kind of scary.
Yeah.
You know?
But then, see, because that's interesting that it was like, oh, but it took Guillermo del Toro, this like big man in horror and fantasy, to be like, hey, this is a good movie for people to check that out. And I think that's a very interesting thing that happens a lot.
And it's wild because this movie is so similar to his and he's so celebrated.
Yeah,
Right.
I've never heard anyone
like,
say
where's the
anything bad
disconnect?
about Pan's Labyrinth, and I'm like, I think it's the same movie. Like, it's very
Right. And that's the unfortunate times where when there are women in film who just have made just bonkers stuff, just some fantastic things. I mean, Slumber Party Massacre 2 was filmed by a woman, and that's like, what? it's just like, it feels like such a misogynistic movie, but it's just like, no, like, this is totally a woman's vision. But it's aspects that I feel like that aren't given the chance and the light of day to really allow that to shine through when it comes to films by women, because the same thing to me happened to the Babadook. And I remember how hard I advocated for the Babadook to come here to the States, and when we finally got something like that, it's just like, yo, like, this is dope. And then Karen Kusama, who got bashed for making Jennifer's Body, and now it's a cult classic, and you're just like, well, where were you in 2009? Like,
yes, exactly. And this brings us back around to the movie in question, because like there's a lot of this subtext of like the male ego versus female resolve, especially between Estrella and like Shine, and especially like
And
right
the
at
specific
first.
danger that women and girls are in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when she first comes to the little boy gang for help, and they're like, chicks are bad luck, and they don't want her because she's like this young woman, and she has to like go above and beyond to prove herself, where she has to like, you know, kill Cacao, or when she says she's going to kill him.
But on some level, you can't blame the little boys either, because they're just trying to survive, and she will make it harder for them.
The other gang, the older boy gang, and like what I call the Foot Clan warehouse, where they're like just like the burning piano, which we'll get back to in a second, but
so
like
beautiful.
when they encounter like the older boy gang continues to perpetuate this idea that like girls can't be in gangs and girls can't be tough or whatever. Trey is like constantly proving herself over and over again, and then she does survive all the way to the end.
And she's a fantastic final girl on top of that. Like she's just so crafty,
Truly, yeah.
so smart. And it's funny because even though like Shine was the leader of this group, like you could definitely tell like a couple of his friends were probably older than him within the group, yet he was the leader of it. And when the Estrella came, like she was pretty much big sister. And it was, some conformed to her a lot quicker than Shine did. Shine had his guard up and was just like, yeah, you're just another mouth to feed or whatever. And it's just like, getting mad at, gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but it was so heartbreaking when he passed. But the little boy.
You're talking about little Morrow?
Morrow, yes, Morrow. And I was just,
oh my God,
like,
talk about like cute kids too.
seriously.
Jesus.
Oh my gosh. And none of these kids have ever acted before.
Yeah. Wild.
That's insane.
They were not given the full script beforehand, and it was shot chronologically, so that the kids had a more authentic reaction to everything that was happening in them. And I thought that was like such incredible directing, like kind of
totally.
devious, but like I think it worked out well. As much violence as they are surrounded by and just sheer brutality, all of the scenes of the kids just playing and just being kids were so gorgeous.
So endearing, too.
And such a great juxtaposition, because I think that
100%.
kind of magical realism, and I think this is what she does better than Guillermo del Toro, is to show that kids are kids no matter what.
Right. It was such like a reality check almost, because this sort of violence was real, and yet, like, kids are kids no matter where in the world they are, no matter what their circumstances.
Yeah, and I feel like in other movies, there's always like there's a character that's really innocent in the beginning, something bad happens, they toughen up, and then they're just tough for the rest of the movie. Like in The Devil's Advocate, they just were tough, and they just had to be tough the whole time.
And the interesting aspect behind them coming back to them being, I guess, acting like kids, acting like their age, is so telling as to reminding us as viewers, like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. These are kids that we're watching. It's a beautiful reminder to let us know that, remember, these are kids going through this real stuff right now. These are children having to deal with this. And it just was such a telling film. And it was actually the 5th film that we've ever covered on Nightlight. And it's something that is just painstakingly beautiful at us realizing that we are watching children having to do things that adults shouldn't even have to do. And it's just, it's, oh my God. It's just, gosh, shout out to Issa López. Oh my God.
I know, seriously.
Shout out to Issa López.
I feel like
that's all I can say.
it's significant too that, like, as much as we compare it to the Goonies or like the Lost Boys kind of deal, that the different thing about this movie is that adults aren't just absent, but they are actively dangerous. Right,
they're the threat.
Coming for these kids. So the fact that they're able to like retain their humanity and still, they could very easily just decide to join up with the gang, but these kids know in their hearts that is not the thing to do. That is not the right path.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking a lot about like kids as a lens and as a viewpoint, and it was like, does it trivialize the sort of the situation and the violence? Does it make it seem like this sort of like playland, or does it like make it more real? Like, where are the adults? Like, why? Right. Where are the adults?
Right, and it's very interesting even like thinking about that, because it's very much like, if Children of the Corn, that's pretty much like the main concept that I always kind of gravitate towards, is Children of the Corn minus them being maniacal killers. But with that in mind, because I think about the teenagers a lot. Like if the teenagers were the ones that we were watching versus these kids, like this would be an entirely different movie. This movie would probably be a lot more brutal even. But with with the painstaking that we see these children going through, and how you kind of see these mysteries and just everything just kind of evolve and dissolve. But it's so beautiful seeing how ghosts are even, I guess, spoken upon, especially in Mexican folklore, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's terrifying. Don't get me wrong. It's very scary.
Right.
But it is beautiful on how the communication happens, how everything just felt like it even though it felt like it was danger, it was truly help, and it was truly a guardian angel for Estrella. And I think with even the ghost design in general, with the way that everyone is kind of presented, and I mean, like, all the dead people are presented within this film, we see them the way that they died, and that is so incredible storytelling to me. And it's just giving us by beat for beat, which is why I'm very confused as to why they said the middle section of this film was slow. I'm just like,
Right.
how was that slow? Especially like if like the comparisons that we see with Pan's Labyrinth and so on and so forth. Those are such longer movies. Like, you can't, like, this movie is an hour and a half. Like, and it flies
Very
by.
efficient.
Yeah,
It flies by.
I disagree. So I'm just like, I don't know why you would ever think that this movie is very good. It is very good.
I don't know if either of you have seen the show 30 Coins. Have you heard of that show?
I have not.
30 Coins. That's going to be your homework. 30 Coins. Hopefully you don't treat me like Jonah. But 30 Coins is a show on HBO, and it's based in Spain. And that show has action almost in every, well, not really necessarily action. It's just more so, it's a ghost story, I guess, but there's so many different layers to it. And I feel like what the complaint is for those people, that show, I guess, would give them what they were actually looking for, which isn't a bad thing, but at the same time, it's just, I think you hit the nail on the head, Robin, where you said they just didn't sound like they understood what they were kind of getting themselves into. It just, they were expecting horror creeping out of every single orifice from this film, and it's just, that's not what this film's trying to portray. That's not what this film's trying to say. And it's very much, I feel like, the same issue that Guillermo del Toro has with his films as well, where we started off with The Devil's Backbone, which was a terrifying ghost story that was also extremely sad. And then from him moving on to that, you get something like The Crimson Peak. And then it's just like, well, I don't really understand this. And it's a gothic horror film, and everyone was expecting The Devil's Backbone or Pan's Labyrinth or something like that. And it's just, nope, that's not it.
Doesn't fit neatly into your idea of horror.
Sorry. Like, come on. Gosh, go watch Kronos. Oh, Kronos. Wow, what a movie.
Are you having a hard trouble staying awake while writing a 5-star review for Bunk 237 on Apple Podcasts?
I'm so sleepy.
But we want to write this 5-star review.
Fuck yeah!
Satan!
You pick me up? Drink Red Devil Energy Drink.
What's in it?
Shut up! Stop asking Satan questions.
Red Devil Energy Drink. It gives you demon wings.
I will say that this kind of leads into my first badge, the Once Upon a Time badge. Because the fairy tale frame of the movie is so strong to me, and it's not just about like the stories that the kids tell themselves and that spread throughout the community. That's so important for them, and I feel like in this world, storytelling functions more as like, instead of an escape from reality, it's like a way to distill reality and to explain what's going on, because what's happening is so nonsensical and so violent and so unexplainable, that storytelling for these kids is like the way to survive, kind of. And then that's so masterfully like frames the whole movie, and the whole movie itself is sort of a fairy tale.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people didn't understand, is that it was a fairy tale.
I agree.
It wasn't,
you know, there's that.
It's a fairy tale that
scene.
includes ghosts.
Those are our favorite fairy tales. We love ghost stories.
Yes.
Those are the only fairy tales.
Right. Wait, hold up. Are all fairy tales ghost stories? There's that scene when the two like other boys that aren't Shine, aren't Morrow, and they're talking about like the sort of the urban legend of the gangs, and they're talking about how they think they're all Satanists. They take women and children away, and then they eat them, and they're Satanists. And I'm thinking about that scene because I realize it's like, in this world, these kids they're not reading the newspaper. They're not looking at Twitter,
Right.
Their sort of news or concept of what's happening around them is sort of this oral storytelling of them passing back and forth, these tales and these legends. And the idea that they, as children, think that like the gang leaders are Satanists, and how things sort of work in your head when you're a kid and you just believe it because you don't know better.
Totally.
Right. And I even, to add to that, like the way that they film this particular movie in general, where Estrella is the only one that kind of sees these ghostly figures or has these ghostly relationships, except for one time where we see Shine have one inside of Estrella's house. And it's so telling on how, I guess, the figures, move through and things like that within the cracks and crevices of this film, and the blood just being the representation of, I guess, them coming is just so good. And the whispers,
It's so
just,
good.
oh man, we'll get to my badges.
Yeah. We can alternate. You go for it.
Oh, you sure? Oh, I will throw mine in the hat. My badge is the Scurry Ghost badge, SCURRY, because these were some scary ghosts. Like the bag is just so terrifying. Like
It is very scary.
it is
I had
scary.
a whole conversation with myself. Prince, I'm not sure if you're aware, but my husband Shane, who produces this podcast, is not a fan of horror movies.
Oh,
He can watch some, but he can't watch others.
Okay.
And the entire time watching this movie, I was like, would he be okay with it? It's such a beautiful, heartbreaking story that I want him to see it. But these ghosts were like scary.
Yeah, those ghosts are like visually, those are scary ghosts because
I was like, there aren't a lot of jump scares. The one that got me was the hands coming out of the grate.
oh yeah.
When Estrella
sure.
is-
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
That was lovely.
but
not
other than
the
that-
hand through the cup of noodles. That wasn't that. That
Oh,
didn't
the
get you?
hand
that was a
couple
good one, too.
noodles was a good one.
That was a good one.
But generally, they're kind of creeping around,
Yeah.
But it was quite some good graphic stuff.
Absolutely.
When we get to the end, when they're like the dead body closet, like where it's all of them.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, the dead body closet.
Yeah, that big old closet of dead
You know
bodies.
what I mean? I mean, he opens the door and it's just like, oh,
There's this
okay.
closet of dead bodies here. Who left this?
And like, I don't want to sound weird, but I'm like, wouldn't you want to do something else with all those bodies? I mean, I don't know. You're killing a lot of people. I'm not trying to micromanage your gang or whatever, but this
Right.
seems like not
It's got a smell.
the best way to dispose of your bodies, especially because they come and get you later.
Right.
Right.
I guess for them, it probably, and now I feel like we're digging, but that's okay. I love this shit. But I think for them, they probably weren't like since they pretty much own the law enforcement there, that they're just like,
Right. They're not
even if we
super
left it
worried.
on the street, like they probably wouldn't do anything. And it's 'cause
Right.
we get that
Yeah.
when Pops and Tootsie talk to those
Ooh.
those cops.
Yeah, that
Yes.
leads to one of my badges, which is the
Badge
the-
it up.
Yeah, the ACAB award, which is all
Whoa.
cops suck. Like, you're just like, oh yeah, no, ACAB.
And you just
that means
know.
them too. When the two
You
kids,
just know when they're walking up to
Oh,
that car.
you know,
that
especially because
it's-
the other kid, like Shine, was it Shine? I think called it out
It was
where
Shine,
it was
yeah.
like. When
They're not gonna
when the
do
kids are like, who
anything,
catches
yeah.
killers? And his exact line is like, I don't know, but not cops.
Yeah.
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 I was like, that's right,
He's
little
not
boy.
wrong.
That's right.
It's funny because we see this a lot in horror films, how to disarm the police. Like what, Black Christmas, right? The police car in front of the house in Black Christmas, and then the cop is decapitated, and then
Right.
and then you have it in Halloween, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But beyond
Tucker
that,
and Dale versus Evil.
Exactly.
Right.
That's always like a factor within horror films. How do we disarm the police to make this be scarier? Because the police is supposed to be
Right.
everyone's safety net.
Supposed to be, yeah.
And in reality, we know that like that's not
Yeah.
always true, right? With that being said, this was the most incredible way to disarm this because it was just like, oh shit, the police don't even care. Like,
And it was real, too.
Right.
You know?
This is a real problem.
There are no
Exactly.
adults in this world that will help them.
exactly.
I usually do like a body count, you know, like when I'm like watching these movies and taking notes. I'm
Yeah.
usually like, okay, death number 1, death number 2. But my body count turned into like a heartbreak count because like
Oh my God. One of my badges is the oh no badge because of how many times I wrote oh no in my notes.
I felt that, Robin. I felt that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I literally kept being like, oh no, Shane, oh no, Morrow, oh no.
Morrow's. I wrote down Morrow's many deaths. Like, because when he first got kidnapped, I thought he was dead then, you know? It was just like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I did an oh no. Like, oh no, Morrow, he's getting kidnapped. My heart, like, in my throat, because he's so sweet. But then he survived, you know? Estrella went and saved him, and I was like, oh, whew, okay, all right. And then when he gets shot,
Bro, my heart. Like
I
every single
know.
time, like I see that because like I even when I put the movie on and I was like, why did I request this? Like I don't know if I'm ready for this heartbreak again. Like why did I request this? But I jumped in. I jumped into it full fledged. My wife was sitting right next to me. She also does not like horror movies as well. And
Could she watch it?
did she watch it? No,
All right.
she did
Oh.
not. She was sitting there. And she was just as soon as the first goes happened, she was like, "Okay, got it, phone time." Like she was just like, "I'm not into this, not into this." But she wanted to hang out with her husband, and I was like, "This is the only way."
Nice.
So when I chose this, I didn't forget about the heartbreak, but it was just so interesting to see it happen, because this was my 4th time watching this movie, and when I watched it this 4th time, I was just so thinking, looking at a whole bunch of different aspects of different things, of like more actually of the adults, because I tend to do that where I watch films repeatedly. I watch it in a different point of view, and I watched it in the adult's point of view this time. When you see this first death happen, and them saying that like pretty much all the boys were saying like, oh no, she'll be fine, because they don't want little girls, they want little boys, and things like that, and it was just like, oh, okay. Like, are we getting into, obviously we're getting into territory of molestation and things like that, but with how this guy is taking these children to kind of sell them for, I don't know for what, sex trafficking or whatever the case may be, but even that whole aspect of this film where you're getting little hints here and there, which actually I guess goes to my next badge, which is the make-believe badge. And
Love it.
this particular section is where you see everything being transpired, but it's touched on just slightly. Like, we know drugs are involved. We know human trafficking is involved. We know just a whole bunch of gang shit's involved in general. It's just like them killing people and so on and so forth. And yet these kids have found a way to kind of be afraid of that, but change that to something a little bit more, in some ways, spiritual.
oh,
Because they were just, as you said as well, Tuyet, where it was just like they very much were telling like, oh, these people are devil worshippers and all this whole other stuff, and which is probably very real for them, and who knows, they probably are, right? But
Right.
they never went into that physically. We just knew that Chino was a cold ass motherfucker. Like, we just knew he was cold, and he just did not care about anybody, including his own crew, and it's just very telling. But it was how these children would react to it that made it so fascinating.
yeah.
And that makes this story so incredible to watch. And I think that's why I've watched it so many times, is because of how these children are within this film. And it's so telling.
Yeah.
So telling.
I feel like I have a companion badge to your make believe badge,
Yeah.
which is what I call the Calvin and Hobbes badge, that I
Oh,
wanted
nice.
to
I
give
love
to
that.
little
Nice.
Morrow.
Yes.
Because it was such for me, like an obvious, like the metaphorical, allegorical kind of like really philosophical pairing of like this orphan with his like make-believe tiger, and especially at the end when the tiger comes to life. I guess they're both dead, but when they're
Right.
when the little ghost tiger and little, which are also very adorable ghost tiger and very adorable ghost boy. But even, in the sense of even in like just the Calvin and Hobbes world, how they explained big world things through this like child's imagination, I felt like that was a very like a lot of parallels there for me with Morrow in this and his like
Yes.
plush that he could only talk through his little tiger.
Right.
cute.
I have two similar badges actually.
Oh.
While you went Calvin and Hobbes, I went terrifying Ted badge for the stuffed animal come to life, like that Mark Wahlberg movie when he's the teddy bear who has a foul
amazing.
mouth
Yes.
and like falls in love with a human woman.
This should just be like a plushy trophy of like
It
Ted
should.
and Hobbes and
I actually
like,
have like 3 related badges. So
Oh.
this terrifying Ted badge, and then the not so subtle badge because tigers are literally everywhere in this movie.
yes,
Very explicitly.
real heavy-handed.
Real heavy-handed, but it like totally works because that's fairy tale. These morality tales, these that have like concrete messages at the end. Like it's so overt and it totally works. And I think it also works because they're kids and because this is sort of how kids operate and function and learn. And they're grasping onto things that they know and love, like animals and,
Yeah.
the qualities associated with a tiger.
That
Yeah.
actually went close to my badge as well, which was graffiti artist. That was one of
Yes.
my badges as well.
Ooh. Yeah, Little Shine's a fucking fantastic little artist. That
He
little
was
guy.
awesome. He was awesome, and I loved how he did it to commemorate his friends and to commemorate his
Yeah.
gang and things like that. And it's just like
That Morrow
didn't-
mural was
I didn't even think about
Fantastic.
that, but that is
Amazing.
like so true.
Yeah.
Like I just was like, oh God, just like expressing himself through his art.
Right.
I also like that he was the little art critic with that soccer ball, the one that Australia drew.
that's right.
That he said looked too much like cacao, and then he just stabbed it, which just also feels like unchecked male aggression. You're like, hey boy, like, just like, but then he tried to like follow up with like, oh, here's this ball that I drew for you with this tiger on it
Right.
that'll keep you safe.
Right.
Which leads me to, I guess this would be a follow-up badge, which is the Accidental Tiger Award. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but originally the animal in the movie was a zebra.
Yes.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. There are a couple of interviews that I read with Issa López where she talks about originally she sort of had this idea to have like a zebra show up in the scene, and it wasn't even as prevalent at that time. And this was right before filming, but the producers couldn't get a zebra, couldn't ethically source a zebra, and they had offered her a donkey painted like a zebra. Which she said, no, thank you. They offered her a hippopotamus, and she thought that would be way too comical, so she said, no, thank you. And then they came up with a tiger, and like that was when the sort of everything kind of spun in her head, and then she realized that she could weave this whole theme of tigers throughout the thing and really tie the whole story together with the sort of the power of tigers, the fearlessness of tigers, but also, just like everything I feel like came together. So this sort of like accidental tiger turned out to be this huge driving force in the movie, which I think is such a cool story about filmmaking.
I absolutely
totally.
agree. It's the way that they weave the whole tiger aspect throughout this film is just wow. And it's very much just like pointing gif, but at the same time it's just such a interesting way to let us know, and once again that reminder to let us know like, hey, these are kids, this is their gang,
Right.
the tigers are not afraid. And they even say that multiple times within the film.
Multiple times.
I mean, I think at one point he's like, I am the tiger, you are the tiger. Like,
Right. Yeah,
they just say it,
It's
but
just
it
tigers.
totally works for me.
Well, I have a question because that got me to the end when the actual real physical tiger showed up. how did you guys like that? Or was that too much? For me, at that point, I was like, okay, I get it. I
Right.
get it.
When I first saw it, I was like, is that tiger actually there?
Yeah.
And then I
Sure.
read an interview or a review of the movie that says, at the end of the movie, she comes across a tiger that's escaped the zoo. And I was like, that was not obvious to me. But this reviewer seemed to think that it was a real tiger who had escaped. And that kind of made me like it more.
Really?
Because, I don't know, it was a reminder that, like, she's still in this place, this dangerous
Because then
place.
the very last scene, she opens the door into that big green
Garden.
meadow, and then all of the color gets super saturated.
Right.
Which is very, very clever cinematography.
Right.
But also that felt like, was that real? Or was that like, is she just doing this like descent thing in her brain where she's like,
This
she's
is
like
so
free
interesting.
of this evil. Yeah.
Because my main question that actually occurred to me in the scenes with the stuffed tiger that came to life, and then again in the ending, is what was real that
Right.
in the movie, but then the second part is, does it matter? Does that question even matter in a story like this, in a film like this that is a fairy tale, that whose goal was to create this emotional experience? Like, does it matter what was real and what wasn't real?
It's interesting you bring that up because I think it does and doesn't, because it's so wounded into the reality of everything that with the tiger, first and foremost, I don't believe it was there. I do think that was definitely in her mind. And I try not to make things sadder, but to make things sadder, I actually think she didn't survive. I know.
no.
I had that thought too. I
Yeah.
was
Oh
like,
no.
Yeah.
Because
so
there's no way she actually walked into that field,
right. Like the
into
field
that like
totally was fake and
sort of paradise.
it felt like Garden of Eden, like she was
Right.
walking into heaven, and like
Right.
it's just I don't think she survived, and I think when the fire happened, pretty much, I think either one, she got caught in it, or
Yeah.
she was shot with shine.
I think you're right. In reality, maybe she didn't survive.
The moment that like caught me was when right before Shine gets shot, when she puts the chalk mark on his face to like protect him, and then it doesn't work, and then
Right.
you're like, well, this is fake.
It's like, well, great, this was bullshit. My teacher just lied to me. Thanks.
Well, I have a badge for that, which I call the reverse monkey paw badge. They lay it out pretty early on that you're supposed to be careful what you wish for.
Right.
But if you think about it, everything that she kind of wished for did kind of come true to help her out.
Yeah.
In the end.
Even with Shine.
Yeah.
Like she
Right.
wished that his scar would go away. I mean, and technically got shot. in his
Technically,
scar.
it got shot off his face.
Right. So.
But it did lead ultimately to the demise of Gino and the big fire, and maybe everybody died,
So
which
we
I
hope.
guess is good.
So
I
we
guess.
hope.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't want her to die. Now I'm sad. I kind of hope.
I know.
that she
I
survived,
hope
but
I'm
I don't
wrong.
know.
I hope I'm wrong.
No, I
If-
think you're right though,
I know.
especially because of the
Yeah.
fire.
Right.
Especially because
Shine
of the
couldn't
fire.
have started that fire. He was a ghost.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, he was a ghost.
And I don't think she would know how to navigate quickly out of that location to even escape that fire.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So I
Oh,
don't-
no.
I don't-
That's I just had another. Oh no, she's dead.
Yeah. So I don't think, honestly, I think the only survivors were Tuxie and Pop, because even then
Because they ran away.
They ran
but they
away.
were still inside.
Right.
Like, we don't know if they ever made it out or not.
Oh boy, Prince, just coming on, just killing
This is
everyone.
what I do.
I got the sense too that those two like couldn't survive on their own.
Oh,
You know, like
no.
even if they made it out, like they were not long for this
Right.
world.
You guys.
I know.
It's so much sadder than you thought it
Yeah,
was.
and that's the thing. Like, and that's why I always tell people, like, this movie is like incredibly heartbreaking.
I did read that Issa López originally had a different ending for the movie.
Really?
What was the
That was
ending?
more explicitly sad.
Which might feed more into our theory then as to how
boy.
she might
Right.
be actually dead.
Right. I believe in the end, the kids that are left join up with the gang, and then Estrella just walks out into the desert.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, that shit's in.
Wow.
And people were like, you can't do that to us. So she tried to make it a little more hopeful, but maybe she tricked us all.
I think she tricked
and
us.
it's actually
I think she absolutely
sadder.
tricked
People
us.
who didn't like this movie are so fucking wrong.
You heard it here. You're going to hear it everywhere else. You're fucking wrong. This movie's great. This movie's great.
Hey, Prince, you have anything to plug?
That I do. I have a podcast myself called Nightlight, a horror movie podcast on the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network. That's also Night with a K. And you can also hit me up on Twitter as well, at The Head Night as well. And yeah, be on the lookout for more stuff from us. We're going to be doing a lot of fun things coming up soon.
Prince, thank you so much for coming on. This
course.
was so fun
This
and
was
such a great time.
Even though you crushed our dreams about the end of this movie,
I am
killed
so
everyone.
sorry.
we still
you
appreciate
came on and just killed everybody.
I did. Yeah, everyone's gone. No, seriously, thank you so much. This has been an absolute blast. It was very fun chatting about this film with the both of you, and I'm glad this was the first time you both seen it too, so that was really fun too.
all I needed was 2 people to tell me to watch.
Bunk 237, a horror movie podcast, stars Tuyet and Robin Zlotnick as the final girls of Bunk 237, and introducing Alex Skoke as camp director Susan Check. The show is produced by me, Shane Segretti. Our theme song is written and performed by Dan Zlotnick, and our outro music is written and performed by Axe Slasher. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and it may be featured on an upcoming episode. Have a badge of your own for this movie? Follow us on Instagram at Bunk237Pod and Twitter at Bunk237, and let us know. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded.